Everyone, thank you so much for joining this afternoon. It's absolutely amazing to have Sallie and Michael with us, who are two fantastic preschool head teachers. And because it's a really small group today, if we wanted, we'll just do a quick introduction. So Sallie, if you wanted to go first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sallie Dodd. I'm principal of Brambles Primary Academy in Huddersfield. So we are primary, so from reception, sorry, that's session, we're just going into lunch. Sorry, apologies. So we are primary in our 4th year of opening, so we are from reception up till year 3 currently. And we have just moved into our new building. So we lived 3 years in modular building, and we are now in our new build as of September 2021. So we are another stage in our journey of a new school opening. So
thank you so much, Sallie. Michael, are you okay to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael McCulley. I'm the principal of Houlton School. Houlton is an 11 to 18 free school academy in Rugby Borough in Warwickshire in the Midlands. We just opened last September, so we are in our 1st year of opening. We were lucky, but I'll come to that later, lucky enough to be in our buildings from day one. So technically my campus is complete as I sit in it, and has been since the children arrived, but that presented its own issues, which are different from those when you've been in temporary accommodation. So hopefully I can provide some insight there. We're open to year 7 only at the moment, and will grow over the next 7 years. And our plan is 180, and we have 180 pupils on site at present. That's probably enough for introductions.
Thank you so much, Michael. And Pam, it's just you at the moment. If you were okay to do a little introduction.
Hi, yes. Pam Bridgwood, head teacher at Foxbridge Primary School, Leicestershire, will be opening at the end of August, initially just with foundation stage children, and then we'll grow incrementally. 1 form entry, so we'll be 210 children once full.
Thank you so much, Pam. And yeah, like mentioned, this is a very informal session, so this is really an opportunity, Pam, for you today to pick Michael and Sallie's brains. I'm sure they have loads of expertise and loads of knowledge, and so that would be absolutely fantastic. If we wanted to get started with just milestones, so I know both Sallie and Michael, you both just mentioned buildings, you mentioned some of the journey that you've had. Just as a first question, did you have any sort of unforeseen circumstances or risks during this final stage of your pre-opening? And if you did, how did you manage them? Or what would be your biggest risks, would you say?
All right, yes, Michael, yes. Is that all right? Okay. So I was appointed April 2018. We opened September 2018. So I had between April and September as principal designate to go through the Ofsted inspection. Of course, everybody's now DFE numbered and ready to open in September. And we, my biggest one, I don't know where Michael will be at, and we can use it as a discussion really. My biggest one initially was to make sure that we were branded well. We're brand new to an area, new to a community with quite a lot of schools already in it, and very, very well established with quite good reputation. So I needed to make sure that we were going to be integrated into that community and part of the local schools, but not explode into the new community and make ourselves too obvious. So we did a lot of work. So myself and my office manager, who was recruited in June, did a lot of work on branding the school, designing the logo, designing the uniform, making sure that we were stand out within the community, as in coloured uniform and things like that. We were new, so we want to look new, and then making sure that we were known within the community as well. So we did quite a bit of marketing and awareness to local businesses. That was one of my first things, my first importance. It didn't at this stage, it didn't really, it wasn't really like one of the worries or anything. I just knew it was very, very important for us to be able to do it. And then, of course, the ongoing concern is marketing to pupils and families. That was one of them. And then, of course, marketing to building a team, because I had no team either. Lots of things that for us a concern was we didn't have a building, we didn't have a site, we didn't have, we had an idea where it was, but we were supported by our local authority, so we've been built by the local authority. So we had to work a lot with them as well. So lots of things that were incredibly important, but at this point, nothing really that was overwhelming. But making an action plan, which we can talk about later, making an action plan and making sure that priorities were in place, but it's managing everything at the same time. So I can empathise with everybody that's listening.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. It's one of the things that you hear the most. And I think, Pam, feel free to, unmute and hop in at any point. But it's something that one of the principal designates the other week asked, how do you do all of this alone when you don't have a team? And I think, Michael, you mentioned, I know your sort of free school journey is a bit different in terms of sites and stuff. If you wanted to hop in and sort of speak to what Sally just said.
Yeah, so in some ways similar to Sally, but in some ways very different. So I was lucky enough to be appointed a year ahead of my school opening. So I started in September. It was advertised for January, but actually in the end, it ended up being September. And then even within that, I managed to bring on board my vice principal designate for January. So therefore, there were two of us from that point, which made such a difference, because if you're a sort of collegiate practitioner and you're a brand new head teacher, but you're used to being around a table, it's not that you don't have the ideas, you're just so unsure of yourself, and it's good to have someone else to talk to who isn't immersed. Obviously, it was the middle of the pandemic. We're a relatively small trust, two very small primary schools, an infant and a junior school, and then one very, very large, outstanding, very popular secondary school with a principal who, much as she wanted to give lots of time to me, just wasn't able to, because she was managing half her school being off at the time. So it was really supportive, and it was good for the trust to allow some of that pre-opening grant to be spent in that way, so that I had a human being to talk to. Because then when it came to preparing education briefs and having things scrutinized by education experts, that was a huge thing, really, especially if you don't get the feedback that you might have hoped for. And I'll be totally honest, on our first one we were told that we had to submit a draft by November, and then we'd get some feedback. But then in the end, it turned out that the draft wasn't really expected to be a draft at all. It was expected to be pretty much the finished product. And so we had quite a strongly worded response to our first education brief. And at that point, I then went out to schools already established. There was two other free schools near to me, both of which had very different experiences. One is very successful, and the other one, certainly in the eyes of Ofsted, wasn't so successful. In its first inspection, it had received an inadequate judgment, and therefore it had a new head teacher, a new trust had been brought in. But they were actually really supportive in telling me what they would avoid doing if they were to start again, and I'll come to some of that a little bit later. And again, some of these things might interact with later points, but some of the biggest things that were difficult for us were we were supposed to have everything finished and on time, and 10th of August was the date we had. And so we had summer schools planned, we had the children coming up for visits, and in the end, we didn't get the buildings in a way that was safe to invite pupils in until the day before we opened. So in we moved, trying to get the IT working overnight and things like that. And that meant quite a bit of quick rejigging and making that summer school happen in the first few days of term. And I suppose it's about remembering that you're not an established school, and therefore you don't have to follow the rules in the way an established school does. So we didn't really open properly till the 7th day of the term, if I'm really honest with you, between doing exciting days and team building days and bouncy castle days and all sorts of things about getting it right for us and who we were. That was then staggered, and everything we'd planned to do in the summer we actually did at the beginning of term because we could, and nobody said that that wasn't the right thing to do. So it's just about understanding that need to be agile to change. I'm sure, Pam, you've already know this, but understanding that this 6-week holiday probably isn't going to be much of a 6-week holiday, but then also understanding that you've got to get to Christmas without completely burning out. So it's not going to be 6 weeks, but yes, you must give yourself a little bit of time would be just my advice there. And then coordination between whomever your IT provider is and whomever your builder is the hugest thing that continues to be a thorn in my side of trying to get things established and sorted. So don't underestimate how difficult that might be, especially because there are certain legal things, like you will not get your DFE number up on the DFE site until the 1st of September. So when you're trying to get your school information management system established, or when you're trying to do lots of things that they say you must have a DFE number in order to do, you won't be able to get it going. So you have to have, well, what are we going to do instead? But then you can very quickly get it sorted from the 1st. And again, talking to others who opened maybe last year or just the year before, just because that's more readily in their mind, and to see how they overcame those things and how they managed to get there. I'm going to talk about marketing later. And yes, we weren't a local authority school, so we didn't have those hoops to jump through. And our school was on the presumption route. There was an outstanding school in the trust, and therefore they were given the presumption to open a school. And we're in a brand new development, which at the moment only has 900 houses, but eventually we'll have 6,200 houses. So it's basically a whole new section of the town and borough. But there is a shortage of school places in Rugby at the moment. So we knew that there was the potential for us to be full, but not all of the schools in the area are full. And our context, which we were very frightened about, as were the DFE, was that you either went to a selective grammar school in this area that was outstanding, or you went to a non-selective school that at the time we were marketing ourselves requires improvement or inadequate, and that was the storyline for our area. And so it was how we marketed ourselves, which I'll come on to later in the same way as Sally, to let people know that by sending their child here, they would be sending them to somewhere of quality and someone that they could put their trust and faith in, even although you didn't have to pass an 11+ exam to get here. And therefore, what was our unique selling point? How could they be sure that we would be the same as an independent or grammar school education, and we wouldn't be in the same position as other non-selective schools in the immediate area that at the time, unfortunately, were all in a category 3 or 4 from Ofsted? So how could we demonstrate that that wasn't going to be us? So that's probably my risks and milestones and things that were difficult to begin with, and I'll pick up on other things under other headings.
Thank you so much, Michael. Just as a welcome to Emma and Joe who've just joined us, feel free to put your cameras on, unmute your mics. It's a very, very informal session today. We're joined by Sally and Michael, and we're just discussing the challenges that both Sally and Michael had. So and it's very much your opportunity to speak to them. So Pam, Emma, Joe, if you had any questions, any challenges that you were facing that you wanted to sort of discuss with Michael and Sally, please feel free to, or if anything that Michael and Sally have said and something's just clicked, feel free to unmute and ask.
So I think for me, it's just going through the pre-Ofsted opening and moving to temporary building, and not unknown and unfelt between colleagues on the call today, I guess. But the curriculum overview, I'm asking the DFE for structure and specific needs for that, and people don't seem to be able to give me that answer. They've gone away to find out more for me, because as you know, we've got so much to do. I want to get it right in the first off, and there does seem to be quite a lot of duplication along the way of information and so on, and it's got to be the very best as if you're opening. I know that, but curriculum overview, have either of you, I'm primary by the way, 3 to 11, but I don't know if there's an exemplar out there that I can use to hang off my ideas from, or that a bit more specific for the DFE.
Am I right to?
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I did pre-opening Ofsted, I presented quite. Are you opening full, Emma? Or are you just?
We're reception and nursery to begin with.
So I presented quite an in-depth early years curriculum when I opened. There was quite it was quite detailed, using the framework, of course. But I think a lot of what I sold when we did the pre-opening Ofsted and what I presented was our approach to the curriculum, our ethos around the curriculum, very much about the intent and the implementation of it. You can presume an impact, but until you've actually lived it, you can't really. But it was very much the feel that you wanted. I think it goes hand in hand with the ethos and your vision and your values that you really want to put forward. So when I had the conversation with our Ofsted inspector, she was quite impressed with how I presented quite a detailed early years approach, because we, just like you, we opened from early years to start with a tiny little cohort of children. And then what I presented from that was an aspirational curriculum, quite a skeleton process really, of where we see our children going. What does a Brambles child leave us looking like? And I think now with a bigger focus on the Ofsted inspection framework being around the knowledge and skill-based curriculum, I presented the knowledge and skills tracker. Nice exercise really. So again, it feeds into your ethos, your approach about the build-up of skills. We're starting these children off and filling them full of excitement in early years. And how does that look going year on year on year? But it very much was a skeleton. And we then worked in our first year of opening on the Key Stage 1 curriculum. And we are now just starting our Key Stage 2 curriculum for the first year. And my team that I recruited to were early year specialists at the beginning. And then as we moved on, so they presented and they modelled the curriculum beautifully when we did open. But that's how I approached my curriculum presentation. They were very, very interested in talking to me about presenting SMSC opportunities and presenting British values within our curriculum. You can't see it yet, but they really wanted that underpinning of the capital culture and how, as a new school, you're going to provide. And I always ever did feel it's that unique selling point. Why does my curriculum look different to anybody else's? Have you been given the luxury from your Academy Trust of being able to give your curriculum your own twist, or have you got to do have you got to buy a curriculum, or have you got to?
No, I've got the great pleasure and scariness of developing my own curriculum, because we're outdoor learning. So our focus is learning beyond the classroom is our focus. So it's amazing, but it's also like a blank sheet. So
we run on an inquiry-based curriculum. So everything's about the children leading that, and it worked from the early years approach that we had, and it's just fed into the Key Stage 1 curriculum. And the children, it's all about the deepening, and we work quite, I don't want to drop any names, Harjun, you might need to take this out, but we work with Chris Quigley quite a lot to do a lot of the inquiry and the deepening. And it's working in Key Stage 2 as well, which is amazing. But like I said, you can't really plan that. Aspirationally, I had that in mind because I'm an early years practitioner. But whether it work or not, we don't know. And it has, and it does. From your approach, that's lovely that you're starting with that passionate early years start on it, which is great for you to be able to sort of do a trajectory of where I want these children. What am I going to do with these children to go through school? No, it's exciting. However, colleagues who are in maintained schools through schools just have said to me, "Oh, how exciting you're writing your own curriculum." I said, "Yeah, but it's overwhelming at the same time when you've just got a blank piece of paper to write a curriculum." It is exciting, and keep remembering that it is very exciting. But that was the basis that I went, and it was for the pre-opening inspection. I wouldn't say go into too much detail, but present from you what you want to do with the children.
Brilliant. So they obviously want to know where we're going up to year 6. I was wondering how much detail they really wanted, where they wanted the overview, the termly, the midterm plans for every year group, for every, whatever it might be. But I guess not, that's too much detail, because that's kind of guesswork really, because we don't know the children, we don't know the staff.
Really, you want to give the ownership to your team as well, don't you? You're not recruiting to that team yet, so you want them to put their ownership on it and their spin on it, and you develop your curriculum, I think, year on year as your team grows, and that discussion and the excitement about what can we use as our contextually, think about the community, think about businesses and local area. That's what we do every single year to be able to enhance and expand our curriculum structure that we've got. Very basic plan. But I'd run on a skills and knowledge based trajectory, and so you know where you want the children to get to by the end of year 6, so you've got an open framework for developing topics, themes, or however you approach your curriculum.
Brilliant.
I'd like to give you mine, but that's not the idea. You can write your own and get the excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm really interested in your knowledge and skills tracker. Have you written that yourself? Would you be able to share that as a kind of, or is it? Because that's quite.
The share part is huge. It's massive for every single subject, but I could share examples of it. Absolutely, definitely. And I can't take credit for it. It was my phase leader that did it. We did it together and thrashed it out and did a lot of cutting and pasting of the national curriculum, and then thought, hang on a minute, let's do this logically and track through as we did it as a very visual. We're both early years and Key Stage 1 practitioners, so it's all very much like that. Very visual. What do we want to see? For example, your art skill, you're going to reception, you're going to year 1, you're going to year 2. And how does this skill and knowledge progression look like? And then when you're talking to year 3s, from the last time they did this skill or learnt this knowledge, how much of an impact has it made? So that's how we've written it, but I'd absolutely more than welcome to share examples of it with you. Absolutely.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. Appreciate that. That'd be really
Hadj will
good,
collect loads and loads of information off me at the end, and then she pings out loads of fabulous emails with documents attached. So get ready for it.
Fantastic. Thank you. I have a busy weekend then.
Thank you so much, Sally. Pam, did you want to hop in as well?
No, not really. It's just really interesting to hear about the experiences, and my main questions were going to be around that pre-Ofsted opening. I'm in the fortunate position that I'm well supported by the trust. You know, I'm a school coming into an established trust, and so the support mechanisms are there. And I have been able to, so I've made the early years curriculum bespoke and spent a lot of time developing that. But in terms of the Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 curriculum, I've been able to use the framework of other schools, the other 2 schools within the trust, and obviously that will be adapted as it goes, because that would be a massive piece of work, wouldn't it, to be looking at the entire curriculum. So I've been fortunate with that, and obviously when my school opens and I get to know the needs of our children, then it will be adapted, but I've got a framework to start with.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I know both of you have touched upon, and Jo, feel free to come in as well, touched upon the Ofsted pre-reg and readiness to open meeting as well. Michael, did you want to hop in and just sort of speak to anything that you wanted to talk about, anything that you experienced whilst preparing for those?
Yeah, sure. Just to help me to frame that, Jo, could you just confirm if you're secondary or primary?
Oh yeah, I'm secondary, so it'd be really interesting to get anything from that perspective if you could.
Oh, I didn't really catch that.
Yeah, I think Jo said she is secondary, Michael.
Oh, she's
really
secondary.
helpful.
Okay, because I didn't want to go into too much detail secondary if we've got 3 primary schools and try and keep it a bit more generic. Okay, so we have only just opened. I'm not sure when Sally, I think Sally's 4 years open, and I know that the input that you get, both in terms of your education brief and your readiness for opening meeting, used to come from an education advisor, and you had that person throughout the journey, as I understand it, from my colleagues who've been open a little bit longer, whereas it's now termed an education expert, and it's on a kind of expert framework, and you get a different person at every stage of the process. So we certainly found that there were some people who were more aligned to our way of working, and therefore the feedback was perhaps you could read it as more positive and less challenging. And then there were some people who work so differently in their own trust and in their own way. You know, there's lots of different ways that you can arrive at the title education expert, aren't there? So my meeting had somebody who was very aligned with our way of thinking and actually ended up going quite well, whereas some of the feedback that we received, I suppose what I would say is don't be afraid to challenge the view of an expert, whilst also not being too arrogant and not saying, well, that doesn't apply to me. You know, I'd always really think on what people have said to you. But for example, one of our education experts said that to have Spanish and French available to year 7 was perhaps overstretching and making us overly ambitious. And, you know, that isn't what they would do in their trust, and we might want to rethink that. Whereas in our local area, because we are in competition with grammar schools where they would all do 2 languages, if we tried to say that we weren't going to offer 2 languages, it would very much be seen as, oh, is that because you're that type of school and therefore you're not aspirational? So, you know, understand that you know your context best, and then you will have that opportunity in the meeting to articulate yourself, and that you may get different types of feedback at every stage. Of course, they have access to what the previous expert has said to you, and they'll pick up on that. In terms of the Ofsted inspection itself, you probably know this, but it's the independent school framework that they use, and they're not looking at your curriculum nor your teaching and learning. It's mostly focused on policy and safeguarding and all of that. So the first section of that doesn't apply to this inspection because you're not yet open. So if you're not familiar with that framework, go and have a look at it. If I may, Haj, I've put a couple of links together that I think will help people. So what I did was I went, and they're in different places just to be super unhelpful, and that's just come through as a massive thing. But everybody who successfully opened this year, that is the link to the reports that were written about their schools, the first link, and that's in one place. And therefore you can see the sorts of things that have impressed people about that. And I've included a link to ours as well, because one of the things we did is we did way more than we were asked to do. And I don't know if Sallie did the same, but our Ofsted inspector, who was a HMI, was incredibly impressed that we'd put everything into a Dropbox for her, so she didn't even have to touch the Ofsted portal because it's so unhelpful if you've ever used it. Half of your documents won't upload because it won't accept the formats and things. So we put everything into a Dropbox and shared that. And policies that we didn't have to have, we had already written, even although we didn't have to yet, because they will ask you for about 6 to 8 policies that you specifically must have. But then within the first conversation, she was asking me for other things that weren't in that, like our equality policy and our anti-bullying policy. These were not policies that we were asked to bring to our pre-registration meeting, and yet those were things that she asked to see. So we prepared basically everything you would. And if you were to look at our website, so I've included a link to it, our website has looked like that since a year before we opened. And all of our policies were there just as they would be when we were an open school. We did do all of our learning journeys, but that was more for the readiness for opening meeting. So if you're thinking in terms of what's the difference between the readiness for opening meeting and the pre-registration is really a compliance thing. Are you safe? Have you got policies in place that are going to mean your school is regulating itself and isn't biased and isn't prejudiced? But it's got nothing to do. And in fact, we did provide it all because we just made the same folder for the readiness for opening meeting and for the Ofsted, and then put things in. So she could see it, and she said, actually, Michael, I was quite interested to have a little look at it. So I did have a little look, but I can't comment on it because that's not part of what I'm here to do. But I do think that was good in terms of the impression creating, because if you read our report, and they're not allowed to write very much, which could be a good or a bad thing, you can see little things about how ready she felt we were to open, and she comments on the experience of the leaders that are opening this school, and she comments on the curriculum that we've set up in that report. Whereas if you look at other successfully opened ones, they're far more pared back. The second link is in a different place, and that shows you what gets written when a school doesn't pass its pre-registration Ofsted. And it's often not schools that are trying to be opened by people who are already in education. It's other types of institutions that are attempting to convert to become a school, but you can see some of the rabbit holes that those schools have fallen down. And that's a huge part. I sat and read and kept writing down the things that they had written when it said a school is not likely to meet the standard, or there's 3 things you can get: likely to meet the standards, but only if you fix these few things which we're not happy with, or not likely to meet the standard. And so those are the 3 categories that your Ofsted will come out with, and then you will receive a report. So I just commend that as a way of working to you, because that will really help you with the pre-registration part. And it helps to know that it's not really about everything that Emma was just talking about, your curriculum, your vision. That is all for your readiness for opening. Now, that said, your readiness for opening meeting will focus on that, but you also have to have done all of the other things. And if there are any holes in what you're also preparing for your Ofsted inspection, that would be picked up on, because you get RAG ratings out of your readiness for opening meetings. So there'll be a table and they'll say red, green, amber. And the only thing we were amber on was viability for opening, because I pushed back quite strong on, but what if all of these pupils don't turn up? Because we knew the situation in rugby and we knew that we were going to be oversubscribed here. And I get that that isn't every free school's experience. So we didn't have very robust plans for what if all the kids don't turn up and you don't get the numbers you think you're going to get. And so that was commented upon as an amber. And I suppose, how can you ever be absolutely sure until the children turn up in September? So I don't know really how anybody gets green for that. But you will then get some little notes. If there's anything they want you to look at, you'll get some notes on that. And depending on how severe those notes are, they might then check in with you again ahead of opening. Otherwise, it's kind of off you go, and you'll have some information from your DFE point of contact around that. I'm just looking at my notes for anything else. Yeah, so that the Dropbox was, they loved that. So I would really recommend that you get a secure little area with all your stuff ready. But you, and it talks back to Sally's point about marketing earlier, but I'll cover that off under marketing. But getting that website looking as close to an open, wonderful school and having as much content on it, despite the fact you've not been asked for it, trust me, they're going to want to see it. All of those things that would always otherwise be on your website. And hopefully that's quite applicable no matter what your phase of education. And Emma, I asked the same questions about, is there a format? And their view is very much, well, no, because it's your school and it's your vision. So there isn't an agreed format. So, and we would never dream of telling you there was a particular format, except as we all know, there are things that they expect to see. So for us, they were much more interested in what the key performance indicators were going to be and how we would know we were going to be successful. They wanted to see what those KPIs would be for year 1, for year 2, for year 3. And therefore, they wanted to see how your curriculum and your way of working was going to support that, how your staffing structure was going to support that, how you were going to be able to afford that on the basis of the post-opening grant and the expected number of pupils you have, because of course you can't run like an open school. So how much of what an open school would have you going to have? And that's the point at which I literally went onto that same website that I've just shown you and looked for the 2001 and 2000 version, and I started ringing trusts up and saying, would you mind sharing your education brief? Would you do that? Now, some things you get told you're not allowed to. So, for example, my Ofsted report was embargoed until a week ago. So I've been open since September. So that report will not be published, and you can't use it for marketing at that point, even though there's not that much you could use because it doesn't have a judgment in it. So you'll get it, and then they'll say, we might release that around about Christmas time. I think it's probably so they don't have egg on their face if they put out a report that says that you're likely to be able to open and then for some reason you're not, and then it looks a bit discordant. So I don't know the reason for it, but it took months. It literally was only published a couple of weeks ago for us. And yes, so I then saw other people's education briefs, and that's when I came to know about the difference of relationship between the education advisor, because I could see some very different education briefs that were written 5 years ago to those that had been written much more recently. And obviously I'm talking from a secondary perspective, where you would, in an open school, you'd have a head of geography and a head of history and a head of RE. So how was I going to square the fact that I've got a head of humanities at the moment? And how was I going to make sure that they were getting things that they needed in RE if he's a geography teacher who's happening to teach that this year? Now, we did have our outstanding secondary school down the road. So our answer was quite often, we will rely upon the support and resources of our very successful, outstanding secondary school in the trust. I might have had a view on how successful some of those things were because that school's been outstanding since 2013. But nevertheless, I was able to say that in my narrative of the education brief of what we would do. And in our case, because it was a presumption route-free school, that's what they wanted to hear. They wanted to hear we will use the expertise and resources and human resources of the wider trust and of our outstanding school to show us the way and to let us know that we're doing everything correctly. But then our education expert did point out that that school had had average progress 8 data in 2000 and whatever. So what had I done to quality assure and make sure that it was all how I would want it to be for a new school? So I talked very quickly there to try and get an awful lot of things in, but use your networks. We used ECM Consulting in the end, Emma, and they gave us exactly what you're asking for, a proposed format, and they shared with us, and actually the gentleman who was doing it for me was also on the framework as an education expert, so he was reviewing other people's, and although of course he couldn't work on any that he had anything to do with, he was then able to share the benefits of the experience, and he also gave us the kind of the guns to be able to challenge, because there were things he said, well, I would never have pointed that out if I was doing it. Fair enough, this particular individual has, and that's their hobby horse, but you feel free to go back and challenge that and say, actually, I'm not sure about the bit. And then there were bits where, yeah, to be honest, that's in the mark scheme. The DfE will not share with you what the mark scheme is, but that's where having an expert consultant who can give you that little bit of insight was really supportive, because then I was able to compare what he was saying with these historic ones that I had seen from other schools over time, and that was really supportive. But at the end of the day, it's think about what you want for your school and your kids, and because you've come from an educational background, as opposed to some free schools that try to open that aren't, you're not going to go far wrong. And of course, I wasn't going to write, given current mood at the DfE, I wasn't going to write, I'm going to ignore all of the programmes of study. I'm going to have a 3-year Key Stage 3, because those are all things that the government doesn't want right now. So of course I said we will have, 2-year Key Stage 3. So I said, we will have, it will be all as it should be. But then I talked about things that we were going to do differently and why. And the other thing they wanted to see was everything backed up with research and why. So I've worked for the DfE, I've worked for QCA, I've worked for the national strategies. So there's an awful lot about what I wanted to do that I didn't necessarily quote because Butler 2017 thought it was a good idea, and they did ask for a little bit of that qualification where you might be doing something a bit different or maverick. So for example, as a secondary school, we're not setting children, nor do we plan to. It's all being taught in mixed attainment, which wouldn't be a big surprise in a primary phase education brief, but that's an example of we're going to do something quite different. So they wanted to see the research from Mary Meyer and Dame Alison Peacock, and the people that I was then able to quote to say why we were going to do that, why we had an opportunity as a brand new school not to go with the status quo and what parents believe to be the best thing, and instead to go with what research tells us is the best way of working for children to make them happy and make the most progress, despite the fact that in some parents' eyes, particularly in an area like ours where there's a grammar school system and an 11+ exam, that actually stratifying and setting pupils does not lead to better outcomes, quite the opposite. And in an established school, you would have to try and convince your parents of that, whereas we were able to start from the start. And that, if you were to look at our website, it says it in black and white. If your child comes to this school, and I've had parents ring me up and say, when are you going to put them in sets so that you can push them? And I'm like, well, let me correct your misunderstanding about the way we work here. But those are the sorts of things where you might be doing something that's a bit different from the status quo. And it sounds like you've got a really exciting and innovative project, but they want to know that you're not just a crazy lady with all sorts of maverick and kind of bohemian ideas. Why are you going to do that? Where's the evidence that that's going to lead to progress? And how is it going to be underpinned by the national curriculum statutory programmes of study so that it does link back to that, albeit that it's being delivered in a very different way from perhaps the school down the road? Sorry, Harj, talked about
No, thank you so much, Michael. That's absolutely fantastic. And before I go to Jo, Emma and Pam, Sally, did you want to just speak to anything that Michael said, or just speak to your experience of the Ofsted or the ROM?
I think really, really interesting to hear. 4 years ago, it wasn't like that, Michael. I think to give Ofsted their due and to make sure that the schools that they are opening and the new schools that are coming into the education system are amazing. I think they've definitely stepped up the expectation and the inspection framework for a new school opening. Wasn't like that at all. No point me talking about the fact that I had to go through quite a lot less pressure and I presented in paper files. That's where but I think for every phase, I think Michael's discussion then was really, really useful and very interesting of how to source your information and how to present your information factually as well. And I think I did, as Michael did, go and visit a lot of academies and free schools that had opened recently and asked for their approach to it. Did quite a lot of miles around the country. Talked to a lot of new openers. So yeah, I think for colleagues, I would probably recommend that, particularly primary colleagues, I think, to have a look at somebody who potentially, and I'm sure you can signpost some of our colleagues, the new school that opened last year from primary. I'll share every single document I've got that I did moving up to the time, but I think the intensity of that inspection and readiness to open meeting has definitely stepped up. There's definitely, they're asking for more. Just listening to Michael, that's all.
Thank you so much, Sallie, and yeah, thank you so much, Michael. And just passing it over to Emma, Pam and Joe, if you had any questions out of what Michael and Sallie just said, or anything that you wanted to clarify.
No, not specifically about what's been said, but I was just wondering, Sallie, how many children did you open with in primary?
I think because we're established within a community, and there are 5 schools within 3-mile radius of us. We have 6 schools. We are on for we're here and established because of the need for numbers on roll. So eventually our local catchments will naturally make sense. Currently they're all starting to evolve. We are becoming a school of choice where families are coming rather than it's being signposted by the local authority. But we and we often said it, we were living the dream in 2018 with 20 children and 4 staff. We opened with 1 reception cohort of 20 children. Excitingly, I've still got 16 of them in my year 3 class. My founding cohort still relatively are still with us. Moving out of area was the only reason why I've lost children from that cohort. So yes, just 20 reception children, and then year on year we moved. Next cohort was 40, next cohort was 53, this cohort was 60, and we are forecasting 60 for next year, so we're 2 form entry, so growing on those numbers. So yeah, we did something right in that first year of open. What have you got predicted numbers?
Yes, 14.
Make the most of it, Pam. Enjoy every second of it. And I think what we found, the amount of energy and effort and passion for your new school and the environment that you can put into those children as individuals, that the parents didn't quite realise what the children were going to get, the experiences that they were going to get. Find a minibus, because you can put them all on a minibus and go and do amazing things.
Yes. It's
magical, it really is, that first year. But well done for marketing 14. It's hard work. It's hard work when you
yes.
They have to believe in you and trust in you. And I think that's what Michael was saying about this marketing aspect of being able to recruit to new families who would quite happily go to the outstanding school down the road with an amazing reputation, but having to believe in you and putting yourself out within the community is hard, isn't it? And obviously you're doing it. So well done. And I'm sure you'll get more by the time you get to opening.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pam. That was actually I know Sallie and Michael, you both touched on marketing a few times now. So I think whoever wants to go first, if you wanted to, massive thing, with for free schools, any marketing advice, anything that you did, anything from reflection that you wish you had done regarding marketing and branding. I know both your schools are absolutely fantastic and you've done, great things. And so what is the secret to your success, I guess, the question.
I'll go first this time, Sallie, give you a bit of a break. Okay, so our site is very interesting. It's a Grade 2 listed building that's been converted. It used to be the international radio station that sent out signals in the Cold War to people in the war. It's where the first transatlantic telephone call was placed to the USA in the 1920s. So we've got 3 brand new buildings on our new campus. So it's a campus style, unusually for a brand new school, because it's normally one big building. And then we've got 2 converted buildings. So that would set us off on the right foot, because people's imagination is captured by what was going to happen to these buildings. And all of that ground that I said was going to take all of these 6,000 houses used to be big radio masts that have been replaced by satellites over time. So this site closed in 2007. And people are quite intrigued. So we were on to a good thing there. And the good thing is that the outstanding school in our trust is a partially selective school. It's a bilateral school. So it's got a grammar stream with its top 60 pupils out of 300. So it's a sort of half comprehensive school, half not. And then there's 2 full grammar schools in the area. But therefore we were able to, and I don't know if your trusts have very respected schools that exist, but we very much stood on the coattails of Ashlawn, which is our successful secondary school, and we were able to say, just as you would expect at Ashlawn, you will have a similar thing. But what we didn't want, and a lot of the schools in our area was one of the ones that I went to in Coventry, I'm not going to use its actual name, but let's say it was called Bob Brown School. It's Bob Brown School 2, and then you get Bob Brown School 3, and you get the logo. And Sally asked earlier about freedoms around schemes of learning, and for us it would be exam boards. So our trust was very clear that Houlton needs to be a school for Houlton and for its community. And yes, we share values with and the expertise of Ashlawn, but what is Houlton School all about? And for example, Ashlawn is a school where children wear polo shirts and they wear trainers, because everybody wants their kids to go there anyway. So their image doesn't really matter because everybody's desperate to get their kids into the outstanding school. Whereas I said, well, it's a bit different for us. We're in a school with brand new housing, much of which is from the kind of Red Row brands, the kind of aspirational family brands. And there is rugby school you might have heard of, where the game of rugby was invented. That's right in the centre of our town, and people come from all over the world to go there. And then we've got another independent school, and then 3 grammar schools, and they're all in very formal uniforms and all looking very smart. And I said, you know, we've got to say that you can have just as good an experience here, but you don't have to stress yourself out with a high stakes test at 11 to get here. We've got some of the same staff as the people up the road, and we talked about that. So that was a real key thing for us. And I'm just going to put this as I said it to my CEO at the time. You have to not be British at all. You can't be humble, and you've got to not be frightened of bragging. So the school that was inadequate, that was in its 4th year of opening as a free school down the road, you know, they said one of the mistakes we made was because there was limited budget, we had a lot of newly qualified teachers. We even had some unqualified teachers that had a degree in, and that garnered a bit of a reputation locally for you don't even get a real teacher at this school. And so if you were to look at our website, you might look at it and think, oh my God, how much do those people love themselves? Because there's little pen portraits and bios about every single person. And it says what our degree is and where we got it from and where we got our qualified teacher status from and what schools we worked at before we were here. Because they couldn't visit us. They couldn't come and see us. They couldn't come and meet these people. So there were professionally taken photographs, and it really does read like a kind of university bio for each person. And that really instilled a lot of confidence for our families that they were sending, and some of them came from some of those schools that they trust, and they might have known that the older sibling was taught by X teacher or Y teacher as well. And that was really important. We've got drone footage and fly-throughs and beautiful scrolling images on the homepage, again, because they couldn't come to the site, so we wanted them to see what the site was going to look like. So everything that in the past you might have thought in an established school of, well, that's a bit over the top, or how much money have they got to spend on stuff like that, I really commend that you do it. And then we also worked with a school-focused marketing agency called Didu, and they're national, DIDDU, dido.co.uk, and they got us into all sorts of other press. So they managed to get us onto BBC Dom Digs In, who featured the school as a construction site, and so that was all over it. And then we got a full wrap around the local newspaper with our logos and colours all over it, free of charge. And they were just able to get us that advertising content, that sort of the advertorial content, where it doesn't look like it's an advert, but it's talking us up and saying how amazing we are and getting everybody anticipating coming. And all I can say is that that worked really well for us, because we had 180 places and we were oversubscribed with a significant waiting list in our first year. We've just had our numbers for the second year, and the applications have doubled, and the waiting list is 70. This year. So, you know, that's really worked. And a lot of that is what we've done since we've opened as well, because you have to live up to everything that you put out there. Let me just check for other things that I wrote down that we did. Marketing, the uniform, making sure it's aspirational, make sure you consult with your local, you're going to have to do your section, whatever it is, consultation just before you open. You'll be about to open, and then you're going to have to do this other consultation to check that it's okay for you to open, which feels really retrospective. That's another milestone. I think it's called section 50. And then you have to go back to everybody you've already consulted and just check that they're quite happy for you to open and listen to everything they've got to say. So if you don't know about that, that's coming on the horizon as well. And yeah, what makes you unique? So for us, we said that we're going to have a radio broadcast program at GCSE and a radio broadcast qualification, because this used to be the international centre for broadcast across the entire world. So we've got professional radio stations sitting upstairs ready for them to be able to do that. We said that we were going to teach in mixed attainment. That's different from all the other schools in the area. And we said that we were going to make sure that children did 2 languages, that they had a discrete dance lesson in the first year. And we spent the money not on things in the first year, but on people. So I've got ahead of everything. Everybody's got a TLR, which probably might speak more to the secondary phase, but perhaps in terms of your phase leaders, we spent as much money as we could with the post-opening top-up on getting the people right, because then I knew that if they were experienced, they would come with some stuff, and quite apart from anything else, they would come with themselves, and that was the most valuable resource that we could buy. And maybe we haven't got 22 Bunsen burners this year, that's had to wait, but I've invested in getting the people in, because then everybody's talking in the local community about what an amazing place we are and how the relationships that they're building, and that we've lived up to everything that we said we were going to do. I think that is everything that I put. Don't be afraid to shout and to make and push yourself out there and tell people how amazing you are and are going to be, and everything that's amazing about you. You're also the key because you're the head. And all of that, I was 5 stone more heavy this time last year, and I did not want my photograph taken, but I had to push myself forward, and I had to understand that it's all about me because I'm the head, and that's something you're not used to as a deputy necessarily. And I don't know, Sally, if you would say the same. I'll shut up now.
Agree with every single point that you made. Absolutely, yeah. And even 4 years ago when I was doing it, absolutely incredibly important to that. And it's quite, I think, a lonely and daunting thought, really, to be branding something new. You are going to be established. All these decisions, I think, as well, uniform, the logo, how your website is presented are very, they're there. Once you've done it, they're there. You are committing to these things, and it's very, very daunting, and yeah, sometimes lonely. I said that a lot when I worked with New School at the beginning. Find me somebody that's going through this at the same time and let me talk to them. So stay together, everybody, stay in a network and keep contacts with people that are in the same situation as you, or with us, of course. Michael and I will also support you, but it's feeling it at the same time as everybody else. That was one of my, and that was sort of for the end of the thing, really, that you're not on your own, but I'm saying it again. And particularly because I'm just going to say exactly the same as Michael did about thinking about selling yourself and not feeling like you're being too proud about it. Just be proud and put yourself out there. And you do feel sometimes like a politician and an advocate and a superhero at the same time, and you are saying all these things and selling your vision and your values and the passion that you bring to education. And you've also got to remember that it's incredibly exciting that these people are believing in you, and they want to come because you are doing this and it is your vision. I think we are all in a very, very luxurious position being principal designates. I think it's an amazing job to have this and start from new. I'm just reading through my list as well. I think we've both been incredibly organised, Michael, with little lists of what we did. I think when I did this a while ago, I've done this every year since opening, and I made myself a little, all the way from a whole year. So if anybody wants my whole year calendar of what I did month on month, it's quite overwhelming. I always said to my office manager, we should have written a book, a guide to opening a free school. We should have done it all the way back then. Can still do it. No time. But one of my early establishing, and I think it's for pre-opening as well, and apologies if it's not actually within the agenda currently, but is establishing a governing body from within the community. Because we're a trust, we actually have the trustees as our governance, and then it filters down to a local academy board. It was really important for me, as part of, like Michael said, getting myself out into the community and introducing myself and welcoming those other key members of the community to be part of it with me. Come and drive the academy with me and be out there. So I got 4 local businesses that were really interested in being part of the local academy board. A parent that had already registered for school wanted to be part of the local academy board, and that really knitted in that seniority of the management aspect on the challenge for me. That was really good. Michael said earlier, when you come from an established school, or you come from being a deputy, you come from wherever you've been before, you've got a table of people around you that can listen and challenge and question you. And they did that for me. Not all the time, but they did that for me, and they were a sounding board and still are. Still brilliant. I think branding is important. And I said at the beginning, I think being different and being unique and what you can offer. How are you going to be stand out? Why do you want to be, or how can you be that school of choice? Why are they going to come to you rather than the one down the road? Think about that, and that's very contextual and very you, and I think very pivoted around the children and the community that you're marketing to. I can't tell you what that would be, because we're all going to be different. And I loved your example, Michael, of how you marketed out because of the building and because of the campus. That's a fabulous idea, brilliant idea. Yeah, so reiterating everything that you said, Michael, and exactly the same, primary or secondary. Exactly the same.
Thank you so much, Sally. And I'm just aware of time. Did Emma, Jo, Pam, did you have any sort of final remarks or anything that you'd like to say just before we close off the session today?
Just a massive thank you. It's lovely to spend time with people that have been through it and are still smiling. It feels like a snowball, actually, this week particular. I don't know if it's the same with everybody else out there, but this week the momentum is increasing hugely. So many decisions to make, so many things to get ready. So if you've got anything you can share that's going to help, your monthly notes might be really helpful again, Sally. I just feel like a magpie. I'm just absorbing all sorts of things all over the place at the moment. My brain is growing. I hope it's growing anyway. So yeah, thank you very, very much for today. It's been great.
Thank you, Emma. Pam and Jo, did you have any sort of questions?
No, I think that absolutely summed it up. Just to echo that, thank you.
Yeah. I was just going to ask Michael something secondary specific. So is that okay if other people are done?
Yeah, go ahead. Go.
Can I just, we're in the middle of recruitment process, obviously. Did you have to go do your round of admissions separately, or were you allowed to join the normal round?
So I'm very lucky that my local authority had been through the pain of a brand new free school opening in my borough 4 years ago, and them offering separately, and all families holding offers both from the free school and the other one. So I was welcomed with open arms by Warwickshire Admissions, who said that despite the fact that technically we could not, it's possible we might not open, it was going to cause them. They were just happy to offer and cross that bridge when we came to it, knowing that we probably wouldn't cross that bridge, and they didn't have to cross that bridge. And that was far less hassle than what they'd gone through 4 years previously. And if you're struggling to get them to engage with you on that basis, then you could use my words and say, well, do you realise that they're going to hold offers with both of us, and it's going to be a big pain for everybody, and families are going to find it really unsettling, and it's all going to be a big mess. And why don't you ring up Burn Timings, who's head of strategy and admissions at Warwickshire, and talk to him about his bitter experience of having to do it that way, because I would really love to get on board with you. Try that. That's all I can suggest.
It's too late. It's been and gone for us. We went to DFE. Yeah, the DFE who got the line to do anything. I'm currently in this horrible limbo where we got 182 applicants for 120 places, which was amazing, but obviously they had offers elsewhere. So I now have a waiting list sitting with 60 odd on, and 85 who have actually accepted the firm place. But I'm not allowed to do anything with it till the 27th of April. And by then I'm going to have parents who've gone, do you know what? They're in this school now. I'm not going to, I feel demoralised because we worked so hard on our marketing.
Jo, there's a lot of power in phone calls, because no, you can't send them a letter, and no, you can't say anything formal. But if you personally phone every single one of those families and say, hello, so delighted to have had your application. We're really looking forward to opening, and we're really pleased. And we've got you on our holding list, and we've got this line in the sand on the 27th, but that's nothing to worry about. Really pleased to have you on board. Please don't worry. If you've got any issues, please ring this number. And if I can't answer the phone, because I've got 180 parents ringing me, I will get back to you. I'll get back to you within an hour, and do all of that personal stuff. Even do a Zoom call with them, anything you can, and you'll hold on to them.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. It's just, it feels really like, I just want you to come.
It'll be okay. It will be okay.
All right. Okay. Because I can't afford the last teacher if I don't. So, yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I mean, it was all amazing, but that last little bit of advice as well. Thank you. That's great.
No problem.
Oh,
Right,
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much, Mike and Sally. It was absolutely fantastic. And I know everyone needs to head off. It's 1 p.m. now. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.